became a career firefighter with the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Service, the chief of the medical division, or EMS, the unofficial historian of the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Services. Over 65,000 digital images and newspaper articles, magazine articles, etc. Episode 24-38, all aboard, B&O Excursion from Relay, Maryland to Mount Airy, Maryland. This is an image of St. Denis Relay train station back in 1943. In the background, you can also see the Calvert Distillery, and this is just inside Baltimore County. The St. Denis Relay station back in 1943 in Baltimore County. A close-up, clear picture of, again, the relay station, St. Denis Station in Baltimore County in 1943. Locomotive heading towards Howard County, 1939, passing the St. Denis Relay train station. Calvert Distillery you can see in the upper right-hand corner. This is 1927, the Sutton Avenue and Clark Boulevard crossing in St. Denis, Maryland, with the train steam locomotive passing through. Just a map of St. Denis back in the day, 1915, as the B&O railroad tracks go through the center of the image here. 1927 aerial view, aerial photo of the Thomas Viaduct train station. That'll be sort of in the left-hand corner, and this is where the B&O Railroad splits. The one portion, top portion, curves up towards Ellicott City, up the Patapsco River, and the bottom portion curves over the Thomas Viaduct Bridge, heading to Washington, D.C. Railroad crossing is depicted in 1999, Gun Road, just in the Baltimore County side of the river, Patapsco River. 1941, image of Ilchester, looking from Baltimore County, actually over top of the tunnel, looking towards Ellicott City. You can see the Ilchester train station there in the center. An aerial view of Ilchester to include the factory on the north side of the tracks, and on the south side of the tracks you can see the St. Mary's College and also the train station, Ilchester train station. A clear picture, 1927, Ilchester, Maryland, St. Mary's College. The factory is on the north side of the tracks in the river, and St. Mary's College is at the bottom on the south side of the tracks. Close up of 1930, the Ilchester train station, and in the upper right hand corner you can actually see the St. Mary's College in the background. A more modern picture of freight train coming through the tunnel heading towards Ellicott City and points west. Between Ellicott City and Ilchester there was a facility that would fill the coal cars of the locomotives, the steam locomotives. Train would pull up underneath the tower that you see there, and a lever would be pulled and it would fill up the coal hopper of the train, the locomotive train. Going back just a little bit, Ilchester train station back in 1960, a year or two before it was demolished. Just looking at just a map of the B&O Railroad, just showing where it's coming from the lower right relay, going through the Ilchester Tunnel and coming out into Ilchester. An image back in 1868 showing one of the original crossings of the B&O Railroad, crossing from Baltimore County and heading into Howard County, crossing over that wooden trestle bridge that you can see in the center. 1868. 1950, again, just a tower that coal was stored in. Train would go underneath it and would fill up the coal hopper in an automated fashion. 1950. To the front, closer to the camera, on either side of the tracks, you can see two metal structures. Those are actually water pipes that could be swung from the position you see over top of the tracks to fill up the coal hopper. Coal hopper had two functions: storing coal and also storing water that would be eventually turned into steam. So at these junctures that you can see, a train could get both water as needed and coal as needed. 1950. In this image, 1937 has several features. One is Old Frederick Road coming down from Route 99 and eventually makes its way down to the river where it crosses over into Baltimore County. Apparently this is also the site, as you can see at the top of the picture, of the Ellicott's upper mill, power plant and flour mill. Down below is an H&S CES tower, which I believe is just a fancy name for the coal and water tower that we saw early on. Of note, where I read in a citation that railroad crossing you see there just before the road crosses the railroad tracks into the bridge is the oldest grade crossing in the United States, 1937. Once again, looking at the image of where steam locomotives could get both water and get coal for their trip either towards Western Maryland or towards Baltimore. And there are multiple ones of these up the tracks to service the steam locomotives, since they did indeed need coal and water. 1950. This is just an image taken from the Route 40 Patapsco River Bridge. Howard County's on the right and Baltimore County's to the left, just showing the dam that used to be there, that actually the dam ended up creating a race or waterway from here all the way down to Oella to power the Oella mills. This is 1950. Again, more images of the sort of the service station of the day for locomotives back in 1950. Coal tower, and a little bit further down would have been the water supplies. Looking at the donut mill in Ellicott City, 1941. There was a siding that came over from the main line and adjacent to the donut mill. Just a point of reference, some 70 years later, Hurricane Agnes, water from Patapsco River came over top of the tracks that you're looking at right there. And in fact, one of the bodies of one of the people who drowned in the horrendous flood back in 1972 was found caught in the debris of this particular railroad bridge. 1941. 1950, again, just another image of the locomotive service station for coal and water. 1950. Image of Ellicott City back in 1878, depicting, you can see the railroad tracks hugging the Patapsco River and the structures of Main Street, Court Avenue, Columbia Pike, etc. 1878. 1899, just another map showing the railroad station, the tracks railroad station of Ellicott City, Patapsco River, and Lower Main Street and Tiber Alley. 1899. Just above Ellicott City on the Patapsco River was the Dickey and Sons Mill, another large mill along the Patapsco. This particular image was taken November 25th, 1932. The image earlier that was taken from the Patapsco River Bridge on Route 40, and it showed the dam, and I said that that particular dam was going to be supplying water to the mill, Dickey Mill. That would have been about 3 miles downstream. So the primary source of power for this mill would have been water power, and it actually originated, the water supply actually ended up, or the water supply actually began back up at Route 40. 1932. Looking at the Patapsco River Bridge from below, the railroad tracks have been off to the left, about 100 feet to the left of the Patapsco River here. The dam is long gone. In fact, you can see the center portion of the image, but to the far right side is the remnants of the bridge. Another reason I'm showing you this is back in the mid-70s, I ran a call on the Patapsco River Bridge where a lady suffering from mental illness was coming down Route 40, getting ready to cross the Patapsco River Bridge that we see here, and she made a hard right-hand turn with the intent of going through the barrier of the bridge. The vehicle did not go through it. However, she immediately got out of the vehicle, got up on the hood, and jumped. Just to the left side of the picture, she got out of her vehicle and jumped. Didn't look, just jumped. We responded, arrived on the scene. I was the first on the scene. Looked over the guardrails there and did indeed spot the lady way down, I don't know, 75 feet, 100 feet, or whatever it was. That particular day was months after the Agnes flood. Down below was just filled with debris. Huge trees, stumps, huge boulders, etc., and large piles of sand. I went sliding down the hill, not knowing what I was going to find, actually expecting the worst. Finally got to where the patient was after I climbed over some boulders and trees, and there she was, surrounded by trees, surrounded by boulders. She had landed on one of those sand piles. Now, she was definitely hurt, but she was alive. Had she fallen 5 feet further away, she would have died on impact. But as it was, she blindly jumped from the bridge down, hit the sand pile, and survived the fall. When I got to her, immediately asked that the personnel relocate, go up to Old Frederick Road and come down the tracks so that we could begin to treat and transport the patient. I also requested a Maryland State Police helicopter to come to transport the patient to an appropriate trauma center. I think the crews had arrived on the scene and hiked the 100 feet over to where I was with the patient. And we were stabilizing her, getting ready to put her on a backboard, and I think just getting ready to transfer her back over to the railroad tracks and then up the river, when suddenly I heard the beat of a helicopter and looked, and I believe whoever the officer was of the incident was telling the helicopter, go to another geographic location to land. Well, he didn't. That helicopter landed right, basically right in front of the bridge on another sandbar. And so we didn't have to carry the patient that far. Load the patient in the helicopter and down the river and to the hospital we went. I found out later that the helicopter pilot was a very good friend of mine and a family. Edwin Hanna was the pilot of the helicopter that day, and remained a helicopter pilot for probably 35 years or so. Tragically, I knew his brother, Edwin Hanna, who had been killed in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot back in the spring of 1969. Just looking at this particular picture, in the lower left, you can see just the road, Green Clover Road, which you can access off of Route 99 at the dead end of Route 99. But this is just showing the river, Patapsco River, and the Davis Tunnel that is in place there. So you have the Davis Station, the Davis Tunnel, the frost siding, which the trains could drop off some cars and continue on their way. Baltimore County's to the top, Howard County's to the bottom. This is an image taken back in 1937. A 1981 image of a locomotive coming along the tracks of the Patapsco River. This is a special excursion tour going from Baltimore to points west, Frederick or somewhere. Quite thrilled to be able to ride that day. And just again, a close-up of the picture. However, this picture is 1991. However, in 1995, the B&O Railroad, that at that time had become the CSX Railroad, 1955, banned any locomotives from using this section of track. And essentially it's because of the weight of the locomotive. So in 1995 would have been the last time that a locomotive was authorized to go up the Patapsco River on this particular set of tracks. An image of Daniels, just looking at, again, the tracks on the left, the mill houses on the right, the factory in the center that we're looking at. The blue arrow, or blue marking, is just the bell tower of the factory, and the red arrow is St. Albans Church, marked by the red arrow, and the Daniels Mill lies in between. 1880. 1936, aerial photograph of Daniels. The bulk of the mill complex is to the top. Residences are located below the railroad tracks, and residences are also located on the west side or the Baltimore County side. The extreme lower left of the image, you can see the Daniels Dam, and you can also make out the race or the water supply that went from the dam down to and into the mill, which was powered by flowing water. Daniels, 1936. Again, just looking at the Daniels from another perspective, a couple things. This was in 1880. On the extreme right-hand side is the Bowman Bridge, a Bowman Bridge construction that took the B&O railroad tracks, railroad over the Patapsco River. That was one of the original locations of the bridge, railroad bridge over the Patapsco. That was eventually replaced by another bridge, which just depicted by the black line that you can see going from the lower left and into the mill complex. So the bridge to the right was actually the second bridge to be built, and the yet to be built bridge that is currently in place is the black line that you see going from the lower left towards the center of the picture. Again, this was in 1880. This image is just showing Daniels, and of interest is showing not only the mill complex, but the housing on the Baltimore County side, the housing on the Howard County side, on the right side of the tracks, and the mill complex. You can see the mill race as it goes from lower right-hand side of the picture and curves into the mill itself, which again was the power source for the mill. But of even greater interest, you can see a green line, a purple line, and actual railroad tracks. The green line and the purple line represent previous bridges that took the B&O Railroad from Daniels and into Baltimore County and points west. You can also see in this picture, just to the left of the current railroad bridge, you can see sort of a white line, which is actually the footbridge that crossed the Patapsco River that allowed individuals who lived on the Baltimore County side of the river to traverse and go to work at the Daniels Mill complex. Where that purple line is going through at the very bottom of the picture, you can actually see one of the foundation marks of the structures of that particular bridge back in the day. Again, this is an image taken back in 1956. Bowman Bridge back in 1870 was a unique construction. The bridge itself, this bridge itself is 1870, was the second bridge that was constructed. Around the same time in Savage, Maryland, a spur of the B&O Railroad actually went into the Savage Mill, and there will be some pictures of that in another feature. We're looking here at an aerial picture back in 1937, and this is of Woodstock, Maryland. At the very bottom of the picture is Woodstock Road, heading towards the river, crossing the tracks, and the railroad station is there at the tracks on the left-hand side, and then the river is flowing beneath Woodstock Road as it goes into Baltimore County and up the hill. 1937. 1910, this is the Woodstock train station, which back in the day, you have to remember that this was a very popular mode of transportation to take the train from many points in Maryland, but also points along the Patapsco River, from points in the Patapsco River Valley into Baltimore. And it was quite a useful sort of transportation. This image taken in 1910. In the 70s, we're looking at an image here of the Sykesville train station. We're looking at an image now of Marysville Road, the train crossing of the Patapsco River, with the railroad tracks sort of bending from the upper left to the right. But this is an image of Marysville and the railroad crossing in downtown Marysville in 1953. 1975, this was a bridge that had carried traffic after the floods of 1972, Hurricane Agnes, and bridge had been reconstructed. We're looking at this image. This is an image taken back in 1953 of Henryton Road and the Henryton Hospital complex in the upper left. The railroad tracks are winding through Patapsco Valley and crossing the Patapsco River at the bottom of the image. 1953. 1975, the original Henryton Road bridge over the Patapsco River had been destroyed by Hurricane Agnes. This was the replacement bridge, and that too succumbed to hurricane in 1975, Hurricane Eloise. Destroyed that bridge, and another bridge eventually was constructed of concrete, and that's still standing today. But this is Henryton Road crossing the Patapsco River. What we're looking at here is 1938. In the upper right quadrant is Springfield Hospital, and the railroad track, railroad spur, B&O Railroad Spur, that is eventually heading to Springfield, which brought supplies in, coal, etc. But this is the spur from the B&O Railroad back in 1938, heading towards Springfield Hospital. This is the bridge that did it in Sykesville, on the upper end of Sykesville, that carried the spur, railroad spur from the main tracks that had been behind us towards the Springfield Hospital. That would have been a mile or two ahead. 1970, this is just on the Springfield complex, a little shuttle engine here, diesel engine that will be shuttling coal and other supplies back and forth from the main line back towards Sykesville to Sykesville's Springfield Hospital. 1970. We're now looking at a crossing, B&O Railroad crossing in downtown Gaither, image taken in 2001. Just another image looking at the Sykesville train station, image taken in 2001. You can see the station in the background. If you look carefully at the bottom of the picture, you can see a set of tracks that are veering off to the left. This was the spur that would have had back in the day that would have taken supplies up the hill to the Springfield State Hospital. And we saw a couple pictures prior to that of where the spur went and how it transported supplies to directly to Springfield Hospital. This is taken in 2001. 2019, just a picture of the Sykesville train station. Moving further west, this is an image in 1943 of the boom town of Woodbine, Maryland. A lot of freight went through there. It was noted for grain to Baltimore. The building to the left is the Woodbine train station. Woodbine, Maryland, 1943. Still moving a little bit further west, this is the Twin Arch Bridge that spanned both Howard and Carroll County. Twin Arch Bridge was constructed back in 1901 and has been in existence and structurally is just fine. About 120 years later, is still just standing strong. So we're looking from Howard County towards Carroll County. And this is the current image of that bridge that's been in existence since 1901. This is an image of near Mount Airy. At one time, Route 40, coming from Howard County and about a mile into Howard County, Route 40 actually crossed the tracks here that you can see and went down into Sykesville and became, Frederick Road that went towards Newmarket, etc. This bridge was eventually torn down, but this was where the Route 40 back in the olden days went towards Mount Airy and points west on what is now Frederick Road. And that concludes our train trip from Relay to Mount Airy, Maryland. Please use your remaining heartbeats wisely and not waste a single precious one.